Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the virtual plant clinic. I'm here with Master Gardener Bernie, and we're here to answer your questions. As always, Dr. Bill is not here today, so it's just going to be Bernie and I. So if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments. We'll answer them to the best of our ability. Bernie, I know you wanted to talk a little bit about the cold weather.
I do, and I thank you, Colby. We have a forecast for possible freezing temperatures for Saturday night. And it's one of those things that protecting plants seems to be a big problem. My neighbor across the street last year put plastic trash bags over the plants and tied them down. And every plant she did that to obviously was not protected, and they all died. So knowing what to do is very important. And good morning. So what needs to be done is, in order to protect the plant, we're going to build a little tent so the heat from the ground can come up and keep the plant at least above freezing. The damage is done when the temperature goes below freezing and you develop a frozen cell. It ruptures the cell, destroys the plant. So plants produce no heat at all. So if you wrap it up like a lollipop, all you've done is wrapped it up like a lollipop. You have done nothing to protect it. So you need to put something over it that's going to retain the heat. Small plants, just sticking a cardboard box over something is really an ideal way to go. It's very simple. It's very fast. Holds the heat and does a pretty good job. A waste basket, anything like that. Plants a little bigger, you may need to go to something like freeze cloth or blankets or whatever. As a general rule, whatever you're covering the plants with needs to go down to the ground and should not actually touch the foliage of the plant. If it does, especially plastic coverings, if plastic touches the plant, it conducts the cold right into the plant, and you almost always get damage. So it's important that it not touch the plant. It's important that it goes down to the ground. Remember, it's the heat out of the ground that's going to protect the plant. So, if it's cold for 4 days, we get one of those things where it's 18 degrees at night and 26 degrees during the day, and it does that for a couple of days, you're going to run out of heat from the ground, and you're going to lose the plant. So probably the most important thing I can tell you is, unless you really want to spend a lot of time with the plants, don't plant things that are tender. So with that said, I know you're going to go out and do it anyway. So it makes good sense to have some coverings available. Old blankets work great, old sheets. A real good source of these things are the thrift stores. Go buy, who cares if the blanket's got a hole in it or whatever. Just buy some old bed coverings and use them. You may have to put some little props up to keep them off of the plants, but that's fine. A broomstick or anything, so you can build little tents.
Yep.
And avoiding landscape materials that are really tender is absolutely the best way to go. And the terrible part about it is, if I tell you that a plant's tender and you shouldn't plant it, for some reason, your neighbor across the street's going to plant one. It's going to live forever and ever and ever, no matter what happens. And the ones you buy are going to die. So just remember, always at least check and be sure that the plant is satisfactory for the zone that you're in. They've rezoned our area here. Hernando County used to be zone 9A. they've made it 9B, and that's a mistake
I'll pull up a
because
map for that so we
we
can
are
see it.
9B most years, but not always. And every once in a while, we get some of that uh, 8 weather. So the best advice on zone is to buy plants that are happy from zone 8 to zone 10, and then you're pretty well covered. I had a customer today call and sent some pictures of a cypress type plant. Could have been Leyland cypress or one of those others that has fungal infection and in pretty terrible shape. Well, the truth is, every plant with needles, with rare exceptions, northern red cedar is an exception. That's a native plant, but most of those things, the Leyland cypress, if it looks like a Christmas tree, doesn't do well here in Florida. And the problem is we are an area where the temperatures aren't so bad, but the temperature and humidity together really damage the plants. So it's the perfect situation for fungus. We get these little rains and the plant stays wet for a couple of days with really nice high temperatures. We get this in the summer, you're in the high 80s, low 90s every day for a while. And the rainy season occurs at the same time. So you couldn't ask for nicer conditions for fungal problems. And those plants have them. Those plants are very, very well adapted to being up north. They're not adapted to being in Florida. So there again, probably makes sense to check. You can call the extension and say, I'm thinking about spending some money putting these plants in. Are they going to do well? And we're glad to provide that service. It's very beneficial to the customer. I moved to Florida and did what everybody else did. I went out and bought a lot of plants, and I'm amazed at how many plants they sell that aren't really satisfactory for this area. And they died. I was stunned. I had never gardened in the South, and actually I hadn't even gardened in the North. But I went out and bought things that were pretty, and pretty just doesn't make it. It also needs to be adaptable, and so the only way you can find out if it's adaptable is do a little research. The people selling it to you aren't going to tell you that, hey, you really shouldn't plant this here. They've had enough people that are happy to buy it. They're happy to sell it. They take the money. It's your problem. So,
And those people are happy to buy it again too, which is the thing. I think that you have to remember that when you have something, when you see a plant that normally does not grow around here, if you see it growing in someone's yard, you don't need to take that as, oh, well, it can grow here. That's more than likely the exception and not the rule. So you have microclimates everywhere that can produce certain factors that will allow a plant to survive, and you would have to, you'd have to know that before you plant it. So if you see something strange planted, don't run out and buy it yourself, because more than likely, if you do, you're just throwing money away. We have a Buddy mentions here that he's been using the hot hands on his cold sensitive potted plants. That's a good way to produce some heat. I'd say make sure that those don't get wet, but other than that, seems like a pretty good idea. I know you mentioned that keeping the cover off the foliage. A good way to do that, I've seen people use like tent poles. They'll nail into the ground or some kind of stake, like a wood stake, and then drape it over the top. And then even those, if you have something a little bit bigger, I've seen, we had a tetherball pole that we put next to this little tree we had in the yard when I was a kid. You might have to, get a little creative to make something work.
The thing about it is that if you really are into these plants that are marginal here, and you're going to have to cover them every year, it almost makes sense to go out and buy something like PVC pipe and the fittings, push them together. Don't glue them together, and make your little tents.
Hmm.
And when you're done, when the season's over, uh, just take them all apart, and you can store them in the garage or someplace all
Use them again
uh,
next year.
in one little bundle, and wouldn't take up much space. It's like Italian cypress. It's a beautiful plant. Grows uh, columnar like. It shoots up nice and tall. Uh, it's a terrible plant here unless it's beautiful. And the sad part about it is probably 75% of them don't survive very well. So you see one of those that looks great, or you see somebody's house where they've got 6 or 8 of them, and they're 15 feet tall, and it really looks good. Um, there's a fooler, because as a general rule, that particular spot has everything going for it. Uh, the right protection for the plant, the right microclimate, the whole works. The odds are that the plant will develop a fungal infection in 75% of the plants, and not make it more than 3 or 4 years. So um, what I tell you, if I say don't buy one, they don't grow well, and you buy one and it does grow well, you think I'm an idiot. Well, you're probably right. But the thing about it is, as a general rule, plants with needles do not do well in Florida. So, uh, once you know that, if you decide to take a chance, remember you're taking a chance, and don't be disappointed if you do develop the fungal infection. By the same token, uh, that applies to a lot of the landscape. We'll gladly give you a little book with the plant guide, and you can do landscaping like an expert, because the plants that are listed in the guide, although it's not totally inclusive of everything, uh, it covers plants that are very, very successful. And if you match the conditions that you're going to put the plant in with what the requirements are for the plant, you're going to be very, very successful. And if you just go out and buy plants and stick them in the ground, you're going to watch a lot of them turn brown. So, um, that, and and I realize I'm talking to the choir here, because the people that are watching this show are heads and shoulders above the average public. But maybe if you think about it and pass this information on to some of your friends and neighbors, uh, we can make everybody a little more satisfied with what's going on in their landscape. And you, as the Florida Friendly Coordinator, uh, landscaping is kind of like your number one consideration.
Yeah. Um, we got another question here about the compost bin that you got from the class. So I actually have not seen one of those compost bins put together. The old ones we used, I've seen a few of those. I do know that in general, a good way to turn it's with a shovel. And for the is it okay that they're filled with flies? So the thing with the flies is, if you don't mind the flies, they're normally all right. I wouldn't worry about it too much if they're not bothering you. You can get rid of them, I think, by adding more things like cardboard, uh, wood chippings, like fallen leaves and stuff. I believe that the flies are more attractive to the fruit, the food waste, really, more so than the leaves and all that. So if you add some cardboard, a little bit of cardboard, like shredded cardboard, brown leaves, bark, wood chips, things like that, that'll reduce the amount of flies in there. But if the flies aren't bothering you, I wouldn't worry about it too much.
Yeah, if you would turn it when you put food
Yeah,
waste in,
yeah,
that
and then
that would help considerably.
turning it will also reduce your occurrence. The flies, though, because when they lay their eggs in there, the little maggots will help aerate it. They aid in decomposition, as insects typically do. But they're really only a problem if, like, they're a problem for you if they're getting in your house.
Once
things. Like,
composting is up and running, the temperatures start getting high enough that the flies are not the
mhm,
problem, except for the food waste that are sitting right on top. So,
mhm.
um, and composting does give you a wonderful organic source to add to the soil if you're gardening. There is nothing better than compost. It has all the neat things. It has the organic material to help your soil hold nutrients and water, has some nutrients, and it helps with the microbes that you need to break down the soil and provide uh, the nutrients to the plant. So it's a win-win-win situation. And
Yep.
the more you have, the better off you are if you're a gardener. So
Yeah.
can't say too much about that.
Yeah. If you're interested in getting a compost bin, the signups are open until Friday on our compost bin rain barrel workshop that we're having here at my office in Brooksville. Um, Dr. Bill will be talking about compost bins. I'll be talking about rain barrels. The rain barrels you have to pay for. They are $66. But the compost bins are free if you are a resident of Hernando County. So if that's something you're interested in, please feel free to sign up. You can find all that stuff. I'll put my links towards the end, or I can actually throw one of them up right now so you know. The link to sign up will be right there. And you can find that link also on my Facebook page and my Instagram page at Hernando FFL. Um,
That rain barrel is a really good deal. It's less than half of what they retail for,
oh yeah,
and
yeah.
because you're
If you were to
buying
try
them
to,
in quantity and selling them for basically what you pay for them,
mhm.
you got a better deal than uh, the average person, even if you could buy it wholesale. So a
Yeah,
lot of these things they sub wholesale, and it's a really neat deal. Rainwater has a lot of benefits for the plants that people don't realize. First, when the rain's falling, picks up the carbon dioxide out of the air and goes slightly acidic, which
hmm
most plants prefer to be watered slightly acidic. It has none of the calcium in it that you get from pumping water out of our limestone aquifer.
hmm
So, the plants really benefit from rainwater. And
yeah, it's one of the only ways, like only like consistent ways that you can help out those plants that like it a little bit more acidic when you have really basic soil. The I like to tell people, I'm not in the selling rain barrels business, so you're getting a good deal. There is not a rain barrel that you can find that is of the quality that the ones we have for anywhere near $66, and uh, it's really nice. I think it's a quality rain barrel. These ones we're using have seemed to hold up for quite some time.
your compost
Um,
piles have cover for them, don't they? Your
I
compost.
have they so Leanna, the new recycling coordinator, they after the fire over there, they lost a bunch of their compost bins, and they switched to different ones, and I have not seen one of these new ones put together. Um, so we've only had one compost bin workshop since they started it back up, and I haven't seen these newer ones put together yet. I'm sure that she's got one put together that I'll see on Monday. And then the comment here: daily cover the compost pile will eliminate most of the trouble. Yeah, and that's just getting that food waste right off the top. The flies shouldn't bother it. Oh, excuse me. With it with it being really cold, Bernie, are there any plants that you would say are good ones to plant that might make it through with a little bit less input on the homeowner's part? Any suggestions you have off the top of your head?
Well, it's one of those things that you almost have to check on every particular plant. It's like people that that want citrus. If you want a lemon and you plant a regular lemon, they get damaged pretty quick. But if you plant a Meyer lemon, they're very cold hardy for citrus. So Meyer lemon would last a long time here. That would be a good recommendation if we didn't have greening. But
Mm-hmm. I
by the
always
same
wonder.
token, lime trees are probably the most tender of all the citrus, and avocado trees are very, very tender. The great avocados that everybody wants, this is too far north.
Mm-hmm.
And it's amazing how quick it changes. There's 10 degrees difference between here and I-4.
Mm-hmm.
So Orlando tends to run about 10 degrees warmer than we are. Pinellas County is about 10 degrees warmer than we are. So the coast here in Hernando County, the Hernando Beach is 7 or 8 degrees warmer than Brooksville. So that it depends on where you are, along with what your zone is. The zone thing varies so dramatically that
Mm-hmm.
if you're in a high spot on the east part of the county, and it's a real clear area, you're probably going to have some problems because you'll get radiation cooling
Mm-hmm.
really quick. Well, that just looks to an open sky. Now, if you've got a lot of trees, you don't have the radiation cooling, and a house that is in the open next door to a house that has a lot of trees, you can have as much as 15 degrees difference at ground level
Mm-hmm.
between adjacent houses in a neighborhood.
Yeah,
So,
it's really important to remember with that plant hardiness and that's an average. And there are more little microclimates than you can comprehend that vary. I mean, it might be 15 yards and it can vary, just depending on exactly what's there. So it's more of a guideline. It's not really a hard stuck rule. So you might plant something that, oh, they say it'll be good here and it dies, because you have something slightly different than the average. We got a question here. What is the best fertilizer for olive trees? How often and the best time to apply it?
I don't know. Up until about 5 years ago, we didn't recommend olive trees here. Um, the thing about an olive tree is its climate is where they exist normally is Mediterranean, which is
Mm-hmm.
warm and dry, and we're warm and humid. So the consensus was that it probably wouldn't work. Well, it turns out there are some varieties that do play fairly well, and there's several people in the area. I'll have to look that up, but I would say one of the fertilizers for um, probably either avocado or palm. Palm fertilizer is one of those things that's expensive, but you can use it on anything. And
I'm pretty sure, not to interrupt you, but I'm pretty sure I remember seeing a very detailed IFAS article about palm or olive tree nutrition, that I saw in my lookings for some other issue.
well,
Um, and it's very detailed, and I think it's like it goes down to like all your essential nutrients, what you need, and etc.
Teresa's probably looking that up for us
Oh
right
yeah,
now.
I expected to see it in the
Yeah,
comments.
I think it'll pop up in a minute or two if there is one. It's really kind of interesting. Olive trees are one of those things that I have seen very, very successful
Hmm.
growth of olive trees in the county, and they're the ones that I've seen have been in two totally different environments. So it's probable that we use 10-10-10 and potash for our olive. The third 10 is potash. 10-10-10, that's potassium, and potash is a potassium oxide. So
Hmm.
apparently, if that's a recommendation, they need a lot of potassium. So.
Mhm. And it says they have about 500 olive trees. If I remember correctly, I think they're up north. Um, so, so I don't. I mean, like we were just talking, you can have a lot of variance in climate in a short distance. So if you're a little bit more north, you may have some different results. I haven't seen any olive trees growing here. Now, to be fair, I've only ever lived in. I've only lived in Hernando County for a few months, but I also wasn't looking uh, until recently. So I think it's interesting. You have a lot of plants you see growing that are almost like enigmas that you wouldn't expect to ever grow here, but you end up seeing it. We talked earlier about protecting the plants from the cold, and I think it's kind of interesting because plants die in the cold because the water in their cells freeze, right, and they rupture, and that's what kills them. But then you see places, way up north where they have trees that survive that don't die, um, and it's kind of crazy that the plant has a way of preventing that function from happening. I guess all the water will get out of the top, right? It'll all go into the roots, into the soil where it's warmer, and then the sap that's in the tree kind of acts as like antifreeze. It's super
Yeah,
interesting.
the carbohydrates, the sugars especially,
Hmm.
produce an antifreeze effect. So if you stop the cell from rupturing, it'll withstand the cold. There are actually plants that will survive uh, into the -40s,
That's
-50s.
crazy. I don't know if I'd survive into the -40s.
One thing that is really important on permanent plantings is that you really should buy them from a true nursery.
Hmm.
And the big reason is the true nursery, one, has very good knowledge of how things grow in your area. And second, they have a vested interest in if they don't satisfy the customers, uh, they lose their customer base. Nobody comes back and they go out of business. So we've got I don't know, 3 or 4 nurseries here in the county that have been here for years, do a great job, and for the most part aren't going to sell you anything that's really terrible unless you insist. And I think
Hmm.
all the nurseries, will tell you the truth. And then if you say, I don't care, I want one, they'll say, okay, I'll take your money. But
Hmm.
uh, I don't blame them. It's altruistic to expect somebody to say, under no circumstances would I sell you that plant. You're not going to be happy. So, uh, but
Um,
I have found that the reasonable sized nurseries in the area do a pretty good job. I've done business with them all, and I've been pretty satisfied. So,
hmm. um, Lily, hi Lily. She mentions that there's an olive grove on Grove Road in Hernando County, and seems like Teresa gave us the address to that. That's super interesting. Did not know that was there. So once again, if you have any questions, please feel free to leave them in the comments.
yeah, otherwise, if we just keep talking, we'll probably say things that'll make Bill upset. So,
Yeah,
it's
we
his
don't want
fault
that.
for turning us loose on our
Hmm.
own.
And I don't remember what it was. It was one of the first times that it was just you and I. I remember we got on a tangent. We almost went over time.
I can't
We were
believe
just
that.
talking about about whatever. Um, Diana says, "Is it okay to start the sunshine mimosa from seed?"
Yes,
Nice.
that's
Um,
pretty easy. Yes, It does very well from seed.
Yeah, I've been doing a lot of research on ground covers lately on different things you can use with the like perennial peanut and some of that the jasmine, the Asiatic jasmine. I think and this is one of the tangents we've gotten on is talking about monocultures and how that's not great. You really gotta keep it benefits everybody. It benefits you. It benefits for water conservation purposes to not have purely a turf grass lawn. I know some places you can't. You got to. But having that mixture where it's so much less maintenance, you don't have to mow it. You just kind of let it go. I think it looks nice. It looks all natural and such. Um, but I don't know. I haven't seen too many people. I've told people that it's a good idea, or I've done the research on it. But I haven't seen too many people just up and quit caring for their their yard like that and planting, sunshine mimosa perennial
The thing
peanut.
about it is, it depends on where you are as to what you do with your lawn. If you're
Mm-hmm.
in an HOA, you have no choice. If you're in a community, that although it's non-HOA, it's still pretty much a community, you'll find that the people tend to all do the same thing in the community.
Mm-hmm.
But once you get these isolated houses out more rural, you start finding that lawns are not important at all. As a general rule, they've got bahia and they've got weeds and they mow it and it's green and it's pretty much all they care about. That if you're someplace where you can let the bahia go to seed and the seed heads pop up and you don't mow them off for a couple of weeks, the bahia tends to stay pretty stable. Looks pretty good most of the year. You have some weeds, but they tend to not take over if you're not mowing it on a real high frequency basis because it's reseeding a lot. And that's what the county gets along the highway. So if you don't mind the way the lawns look adjacent to the roadway, that's what you get if you have a bahia lawn and minimal maintenance. Now, if you want something really pretty to look like the next door neighbors who spending uh, $300 a month on his St. Augustine lawn, uh, you're going to have to do a little more than just mow it every couple of weeks. So uh, depends, it's uh, entirely on where you are. I think the bahia and some clover and a few non-big fat ugly weeds is a great lawn. So uh, and
Well,
that's what
you
I had
know,
when I moved to Florida, and uh, by just doing minimal maintenance over the years, the bahia has actually gotten stronger. It looks pretty good. I have uh, about 3.5 acres that we mow,
hmm
and I would say uh, in the first 7 or 8 years, it went from really not much grass to looks pretty decent. I'm
yeah.
very happy with my front yard. Uh, the
Well, I
gopher
mean,
tortoises are happy. There's enough little things in there that they can eat besides grass. And, it just depends on where you are.
yeah. Where I'm from, that was. I don't know if there was a house that had a St. Augustine lawn in 20 miles from where my house was. It was that was never something. It was like I don't think we ever bought like grass seed. None of that. It was like, oh well, mow it, and if it dies, it dies, and the weeds will go, and then it'll be green again, and you just don't worry about it. We would let when the seed heads would come up, we'd let it go for a little bit, let the grass get a little high, but other than that, it wasn't much of anything. Lily says that native plant expert Rita has an all sunshine mimosa lawn, but like Bernie said, she's in the woods, so she's not uh, being held to those societal standards of having that St. Augustine lawn. We have a question here from Stephanie who says, "I have Clusia. I'm not familiar with that. Plants that got salt water on them and now are not doing well. Do you have any recommendation on what we can do to help them recover?
Uh, the problem is it takes water to get rid of the salt.
Hmm.
So,
But you don't want to create standing water there because the plants have already had a bunch
yeah.
of standing water.
So we're almost in the wrong season uh, to do much, but you could uh, actually water the plants um, once or twice a week. Uh, do not want soggy ground, but
Mm.
uh, heavy watering once a week probably is going to do the best towards getting rid of the salt. Salt
I
leach
do.
is very, very quick.
Yeah, I do, and correct me if I'm wrong, Bernie. I think you also want to avoid trying to fertilize it or anything like that. One, if you're watering all the time, you're going to just wash the fertilizer away, but you don't really want to put that plant into let's grow, let's get up, get going mode because it's already stressed out from the salt water. I don't think uh,
No, you
that's
want to
the,
get rid of the salt.
yeah.
That's the key.
And I don't think you'd want to prune it really. I don't think you'd want to try to do anything that might. You don't want to do anything extra to the plant to try to, you know, uh, make it better. The main goal should be get that salt off. Anything else could stress it out, and we want to avoid that.
That's a good point. That pruning, if you get damage from any of this cold weather we're going to have, it's very, very difficult to resist pruning. But the
Mm-hmm.
truth is, if you prune woody plants, you'll put them back into grow mode.
Yep.
And once they're in grow mode, if they get frozen again, it does serious damage. So you
Mm-hmm.
get some damage, you prune off some damage, you get another freeze, and you get really serious damage. So
Yeah.
do not prune any woody plant at all until there is no more chance of another freeze, which means that you have to wait until at least April 15th before you prune any of the woody plants. The herbaceous things, the stuff with green stems, it dies and falls over, you can clean it up anytime. But if it has any woody properties, leave it alone until after April 15th.
Yeah. You also you got to remember that uh, in those plants, anywhere that they've grown, those are all like energy stores. The plant has invested energy there, and cutting that off does remove them. And now, not that's not to say pruning is always bad, but when you have a plant who is, teetering on, this might be it, it might die. You don't want to take away any of those energy stores that it has. I think it's one of those things to consider. Anyway, we have another question from Diana who says, "I want to make a path in our yard that I can walk on. Doesn't want to step on her dog poop. What is a good, inexpensive way to create a walking path without causing too much water runoff?" Well, to avoid runoff, you want something permeable. That can be gravel. That can be pavers. Because even if you have pavers that have um, like they're not, it's not paved concrete. There's going to be gaps, but even better than that is they almost look like lattice. They come in brick sizes. I mean, that's not going to tell you anything. 6 by 8 inches or something like that. Those will those are good. Gravel's a good option. But then you have to worry about weeds and such. With those permeable pavers, the grass growing through is kind of more of a feature rather than it being a pest. And then I know Teresa just put in a link, Walkways in the Landscape, that I've read that article. That one's super helpful in that way. I'm not sure though as for keeping it inexpensive. Bernie, you got anything on?
Well, I think
That
mulch
specifically.
walkways are really neat, and the least expensive mulch is the stuff where they go out and trim the trees and grind it up. And you can get that. And generally, you can get it free. Uh, the problem is it's got weeds in it.
Hmm.
So, uh, if you make paths, and you're going to have to weed them for a little while. But I think mulch is a really good way to delineate walkways. Uh,
Yeah, I saw people that used they had they went to a hardware store and bought a bunch of mismatched broken pavers, for next to nothing because what was the hardware store going to sell them for? And they took them out and broke them up even more and laid them in it, and it looked nice, almost like a mosaic. Lily says pine needles and shells are other good options. I've seen a lot of people use shells. We had a lot of shell driveways back in Sumter County. That was a pretty common thing. We had
Pine
one at one
needles
time.
are really great. Those are
Oh yeah,
beautiful.
yep.
The
They're good.
problem
They're
with
good as mulch
pine
even.
needles is that pine straw is going to cost you a lot of money.
Hmm.
Everything, if you go out and just buy something, the pavers are very expensive.
Hmm.
So on a little walkway, if the walkway's 2 foot wide, uh, and you end up with 40 feet of walkway, uh, you're talking about $2 a foot or more.
Those pavers are $3 or $4 a
Yeah.
paver, and normally they're a square foot or 18 by 18 inches.
So you're talking a couple $100 for
Hmm.
pavers at least. So, uh, and if you go out and buy bags of mulch, man, that's expensive. So,
Oh yeah.
and same way with pine straw. Pine straw uh, really looks beautiful, and it uh, my one of my favorites is pine bark mulch,
Hmm.
and that really looks good and lays down really nice. Uh, but those little bags are really expensive. I
Oh
had a
yeah.
good friend that wanted to fill in his backyard, and his wife said, "Take the car and go down and buy some of those bags of soil and fill it in." And he said, "I don't think you understand how much we need." So he got a hold of somebody that was doing construction in the area, a friend of his, and the guy said, "Okay, I'll bring you dirt."
Hmm.
And uh, he said, "I can only do this and one time." He said, "So we'll bring dirt until you say stop, and then you don't get any more." Well, they ended up with 9 dump trucks of dirt to fill in this, where she thought that you should be able to just go down and buy some bags and fill it in. So,
Oh goodness.
so the amount of things that it takes, you know, uh,
When you start talking
if you
volume, the
buy
numbers can get.
a bag of mulch and you're going to make a walkway, you're going to make a space about twice the size as the bag.
Hmm.
So you end up uh, with 40 or 50 bags of mulch. And if you're buying them at
Yeah,
a buck a piece, that's doable. But you're not going to buy them at a buck a piece. You're going to
no,
buy
they're
them
three or
at
four
five,
dollars a
$8
piece
a piece.
at least. Yeah.
Everything is a little higher than it was last year, and it's a lot higher than it was 10 years ago. So you go to the hardware store and you start buying lawn things and all that stuff that you could fill the basket, and fill the little push cart and leave. If it was $50 5 years ago, it's 150 now. So
Yeah. At least I made chicken still $1.29. I don't know what I'd do if I don't know what I'd do if it wasn't. Um, oh, I had a point to make, and now not having to do with the McChicken. It was before that. Now I can't remember what it was. Got distracted. It's getting closer to lunchtime. Um, Ann says to try pine bark in bulk. It's cheaper. Oh, I got it. So we were talking about pine needles. Pine needles are so pretty. They're gorgeous, but like you said, they're really expensive unless you have a pine tree, and then they're free. So if you have a pine tree, I have a neighbor that's got a pine tree, and they take every once in a while they sweep up their pine needle, I assume. And because I see him with a wheelbarrow coming to the front, and he puts it in the front yard. But he's got a pine tree back there, so I assume that's where he's getting it from. Um, so something to keep in mind. I went to the Valspar Championship a couple years back, which is over in Innisbrook, in Tampa. It's a PGA Tour event, and that they used a lot of pine needle. And man, was it pretty! That was some very nice landscaping I saw over there.
Pine needles and pine bark both tend to raise or to lower the pH.
Mm-hmm.
They take soil to more acid. And if you're in our county, uh, the soil's almost always too basic. So anything you can do to acidify the soil is going to help. And uh, they're ideal to promote growth on just about everything that you use in a landscape. So those two products are really good products. Unfortunately, the people selling them generally know that. So
Mm-hmm.
pine bark mulch, pine straw, uh, great. Not only does it look pretty, it has the advantage of actually improving the soil as it deteriorates. So
Yeah. Lily said, I've seen where people have used turf as the walking path, and the rest of the yard was garden beds. You really do. It is really important. You have to kind of think outside the box sometimes and be creative. I think that's a really one of the most attractive parts of you know putting the time and effort into your landscape is that it's an opportunity to be creative, to really not only be a problem solver, but you have to solve these problems, but you can also make it look nice and make it um, aesthetically pleasing. So I do know that the FFL it's the plant selection guide and landscape, or no, there's a landscape design book. It's on the FFL website. If you go there, Bernie, I expect him to pull it out. Yeah, there he goes. There's a PDF of that available for free on UF's website for Florida Friendly Landscaping. If you Google Florida Friendly Landscaping, you'll find it. It gives all sorts of scenarios and possible solutions to issues. So if we're not here to answer it directly, maybe give that a look up. I think that's a super helpful resource. I'm actually not.
If they come by the extension, we'll give them a copy.
Oh yeah, because I have a bunch of those. If you ask me for one, I can get you one as well. I wish I would. I'm not actually in my own office, so I couldn't just whip mine out. But I do have a bunch of them. And says Innisbrook is beautiful. It really is. I had such a good time when I went. And can pine needles carry plant diseases?
Anything could carry a fungal problem, but it's not a normal. You would not normally be concerned. No.
Mm. Yeah, I see Teresa just put the link in there to FFL. Yeah, if you think about it, really anything could carry some kind of disease. But if it's a fungal disease that's on pine needles, I think typically that would be something that affects pine trees. And I think the people buying pine needles don't have pine trees. Not really something to be concerned about, I would say. Agree with you.
Pine trees don't really have that big a problem with things because they're acidic. They probably are resistant to bacterial diseases. So I would say that's not even a consideration. I've got a good friend that has no grass in the front yard. They put in pine needle pathways, and then everything else is planted in ground covers. It looks neat. It's a fair amount of maintenance, but it doesn't have the problems with grass. They don't have to mow it. So I would say that as a trade-off, it's probably ends up with about the same amount of effort as if they'd had grass. But it very distinctive. It looks kind of neat.
Yeah, I like pine trees a lot. I think it's kind of crazy how we have quite a few different variants or species of pine here, um, and then how useful they can be. There's the needles themselves, they're self mulching. It's really nice, and they're pine cones food sources for animals. They're super cool. Um, I did a lot of pine tree surveying when I worked at Swift, or not a lot. I did it sometimes. Pine tree surveying, and I got to measure a bunch of mutant pine trees, which was kind of neat, like planted pines. I don't know. I'm looking at a write up about the different pine trees here in Florida, and there's just so many. It's like as soon as you think you've got them all in your head, um, yeah, there's just another one. We have an invasive pine I know of,
We do. Oh, what's that?
Australian pine. I think there's a few different. I don't know the exact species, but I know we treated a bunch of Australian pine. It looks like it's kind of thin. It's not it doesn't really grow super tall to my knowledge. It's kind of thin and uh, long, wiry needles. Um, but they were planted. People brought them here to plant them as erosion control, and then I don't know if it worked or not, but now they're invasive and they spread because they
I,
don't.
love, I think the longleaf pine is really kind of neat. The great big pine cones, kids love them.
Mhm.
If you're going to throw a pine cone at something, that's the one to grab. And up Chinsigat, they've got um, a really great community of pine trees. It's a neat place to walk, and it shows you uh, how the distance from water, the height above water, really affects things. There's a little area, little tiny pond or lake, whatever you want to call it, and then there's pine trees all around the lake. And then as you move up, as the ground elevation changes about 4 feet, the variety of pine tree changes,
Mhm.
and it's pretty dramatic. Everything under a certain height above the water is one type of pine. Everything more than that is a different type of pine. And then we've got all like the wild oak trees here. There's junk pine trees and there's junk oak trees. Uh, it's just amazing the variety of if things
Mhm.
are left alone. Uh, the original Florida was pine trees and wiregrass. We had
Mhm.
fires, and the fires kept all the hardwood trees in bay, and the oaks survived the fires, and the wiregrass survived the fires. And you can go up to Chinsigat, and it has a twin park up there, Big Pine Track. And Big
Mhm.
Pine is what Florida looked like 100 years ago. And
Yep.
it's interesting. The pine trees end up being far enough apart that you could drive a wagon cross country.
Oh yeah. My favorite pine's a sand pine. I think sand pines are super cool. They got two. There's two variants of it, and one of them, the Ocala sand pine, it doesn't open up the cone until it's like fire activated. It's kind of cool because, like you say, uh, fires were a big like they're a big they're like there's a lot of fire adapted ecosystems and fire adapted plants in Florida, and it's super neat. And there's another one. It's like the Chakawachi sand pine, just two different variants. At UCF in Orlando, where I went to college, we had this an arboretum, big open natural area. It was right outside the football stadium or the practice facility for football, And it's like that. It's like old Florida, how it looked. There's there's some wetlands. There's a lot of natural pines, really really tall pine trees, a bunch of wiregrass. It's got some sand pines, some wax myrtles and stuff. It was pretty cool. I thought it was that was one of my favorite places on campus.
If you get an area with nice tall pines, you probably got an eagle or two that shows up in the area.
Oh yeah.
We had pine tree across the street that we'd see eagles, and every once in a while swallowtail kite, and they did some construction work around it and dug up things, messed up the root structure, and it died. So
Oh
it's
yeah, it
kind of a
stinks.
shame. Tree's been there for 50 years, and now and it's over.
Yep, we had that pine tree that they got my neighbors have. It's a wacky little thing. It's a mutant pine tree that's like woo all the way up. Um, and it does not look great, but man, if it doesn't, they always have needles on the ground. Uh, Bassam says, thanks to you both for sharing your knowledge and expertise. I enjoy your show every week. Many thanks. Well, we like being here, and if it wasn't for you guys, we wouldn't be here talking. I have nobody watched. I think we'd probably find something else to do. And Lily says there will be a tree walk at Chinsaget Conservation Center this Saturday with Master Gardener and arborist Ken Morgan. So if you are interested in that, look it up. I believe someone told us about that last week. One of the ladies from the conservation center. So check that out. That's super cool. We are getting close to time, so I'm going to go ahead and flash some information here. If you have any tough questions, let's email Bill and ask him the tough questions, and he'll do his best to answer you. So there's his email. If you want to call the extension office, maybe talk to Bernie, get your questions answered, you can call on their number. Is right there. The extension Facebook page, they post all of their events there. My email, if you have any Florida friendly landscaping questions, is right here. And all of my social medias, all of our YouTube videos, absolutely everything that I have a hand in can be found at my Linktree, linktr.ee/Hernando FFL. And I'll check back here, see if we have any more last minute questions. Diana says, is a screened-in porch enough protection for freezing temps for plants?
That's a maybe. If you're going to have frost, probably is. If you're going to actually go into 30 degrees or lower, probably not. Normally the biggest problem is the radiation caused frost. If the plant's sitting there and can see the sky, the ground will cool more than the air temperature. So you can have an air temperature of 35 degrees and have real serious frost. And it's because the ground wants to radiate its heat into this dark sky. Heat travels from the highest thing to coldest thing. Well, the outer sky temperature is in the minus 200, and the ground temperature is plus 60. So it's really sending energy up into the sky, and it loses heat faster than the air does. The air doesn't slow down or doesn't cool down like the things right on the ground. So if you put it on a porch and it's going to frost, it probably will not frost on the porch because it can't see the sky. If it's cold, if it's temperatures in the 30 degrees or lower, it's not going to offer much protection because the air temperature then will be a problem. So I hope that answers your question. By the way, if we said anything we shouldn't, please don't tell Bill. Thank you.
Yeah, we don't need him. We don't need him jumping on us about it. Well, thanks everybody for watching. That's our time for today. All of our information, if you are watching this recorded, it will be just a couple seconds ago, and the recording will be live anytime now. So once again, thanks everybody for listening, and y'all have a good one.
Bye now.